Assalamualaikum and a very good afternoon to all, to the Honorable Speaker, Professor Dr. Pete Commerce, and all participants of PicTL 2020 Keynote session organized by the Center of Academic Developments, University Putra, Malaysia. Thank you for joining us live. I am Aliani Ismail and I will be the moderator for the session. And as all of us are aware, the world of work is changing and some jobs are changing faster than others. According to the latest research, soon we'll only be as good as the skills we possess. But which skills are they and how can we make sure we keep pace? That is why we are here today. That the World Economic Forum second edition has also advises us on the top 10 essential skills to develop with predictions for 2025. I'm sure all of us have heard about it. And they are essentially soft skills. One particular skill remained in the list for the last 10 years, and that's creativity. To get an idea of what challenges lie ahead and the strategies needed to tackle them, especially in curriculum design. We have with us today, we are lucky today to have with us a special guest from the Netherlands as our honorable keynote speaker. And the name is Professor Dr. Pete Commerce. Welcome to Malaysia and UPM, Prof. Commerce.
Thank you, Dr. Aliani Ismail. Nice to meet you and nice to meet the audience. I hope we have an interactive session.
Sure.
And I hope it will be a successful meeting between your ideas and your experience and my ideas. I hope we have a very good, fruitful mix of ideas. Yeah.
So Professor Commerce will share with us on creative thinking to enhance the students' experience from curriculum design to success. But let me first introduce our speaker. I will read your biography, Professor. Professor Commerce is a PhD holder in educational and media design with a master in pedagogy and a bachelor degree in teacher education. His main function is as an associate professor in the university in Twente. If I pronounce it incorrectly, please let me know.
Twente, correct.
Twente, the Netherlands, and has been the adjunct professor and visiting professor in various countries. Dr. Commerce is a pioneer in media education and the leader of NATO advanced research workshops on cognitive learning tools. UNESCO awarded his work in ICT for education in Eastern Europe with the title of honorary professor, and the Capital Norma University in Beijing awarded his work with the title of honorary doctor. He is a member of advisory boards in ministries of education and academia of sciences in Singapore, Finland, and Russia. Professor Commerce has a long-term experience at management level, coupled with a strategic appreciation and vision, methodical in evaluation and systematic implementation. Of course, we are lucky to have you with us now. And I think without further ado, let's welcome Professor Commerce to deliver his speech. The floor is yours, Professor.
Thank you, Dr. Ismail. I will now try to share my screen. I hope it's working. Is it correct? Is my screen visible? My PowerPoint?
Yes, we can see it now.
Thank you. Well, dear audience, I'm very happy that you have all educational experience. I think that's the most valuable thing we have. Of course, we need curricula, we need instructional methods, we need testing, we need good concept for learning, but important is the experience, and especially the teacher, him or herself, is the key to start with. We can talk about media, we can talk about technology in the broad sense, but the teacher is the key factor. You can see at the right side in the green map, this is my country, Holland. The name stems from hollow country because it's below sea level. And there are many holes inside. It's the inner sea. And on the southwest, you can see all the arms of the sea trying to penetrate. And we had many floods in the past. And also we have the rivers coming from Germany. So these are the main cities, Amsterdam, Utrecht, and in the west is also Rotterdam. My city is in the east. It's called Enschede in the region of Twente. There's a famous football team. That's why I'm proud to mention Twente. Let me go to the next slide. By the way, on any moment, you can type in your remarks, your questions, and the chairman, Dr. Ismail, will be so kind to collect, and you will have an opportunity to also say something if you like. So this is the contents of my speech. The first is the triangle between technology, nature, and culture. It's important because normally we talk about technology and culture, but the nature of learning becomes more and more visible. In science, we know that the sleep is very decisive for what we remember the next day. What we eat is important, what we move, if we dance, if we make the music, if we do sports. It's all very decisive, and that's the nature. Most of the theories are about culture, but in fact, nature gets more and more momentum in the studies. Then we have the triangle, learning, playing, working. I will come to that back later. We have active learning, all types of active learning. I will elaborate on that. We have the technical, the communicative, and the conceptual skills. Especially the last ones are quite interesting, I think. We know there's a hierarchy of skills. If you know the taxonomy by Bloom, that's like a pyramid. Then the highest level is the application and the creative usage of the knowledge. Conceptual skills are very high in the pyramid. Then we have the next bullet is holistic for deep learning. Holistic means simultaneous. The memory should be helped. And the deep learning means we are preparing for real life, to become problem solvers, to become creative, to become team players. Then the next bullet is from visual imagination to conceptual. So that has to do with conceptual thinking. Then we have haptic and immersive. Haptic is when you push the mouse, you can see what is the friction. So it works as if you really push an object. And then finally, we have the design methodologies. I will come to that back later as well. Now, one of the questions might be, is ICT still a challenge? Is it still a game changer? You see here, old Greek philosopher in the time of Plato or Aristotle. And when this person would have had a notebook or a tablet like we have now, would philosophy have become different? Would Plato had different ideas when he could search for all the information like on the web nowadays? That's questionable. I think it would make a difference. So we have to think now, we are training our children to use the media, and finally, the knowledge they have and the skills will be different anyway. Then you see an interesting picture, because normally there is a big dispute. Should we use the social media as we do now? Does it take away too much face-to-face attention and communication? Is it new? No, it's not new. Already 100 years ago in the train, especially in Europe at that moment, the people were normally reading the newspapers. So that's not really different from what the people have now. They have the mobile phone and they will do some browsing and emailing and whatever. The same problem was already much longer. And here's an old situation from the 16th century in Italy, where the people would come together in a small village and look in a black box, the box with some light from the top, and there was a play. There was some puppets, a puppet play. And what is interesting, the people, they look in the box, but more important, the people talk about what they see. So that's the same as we now have with the social media. Also, the fake news, that's the big issue nowadays. And one of the topics could be, for further research, how could we make our students more resistant to fake news? How can we make them critical readers, critical thinkers? And that's really the topic. It's not because social media are new, but they are different. They are more pervasive. So I have to give a sign. I hope it will continue. No, continue. Something works. I have to check. Wait, I have to try it again. Okay. I hope it's coming back because the system stopped working. So, can you see this screen again? Is it visible?
Yes, Prof. Yeah.
Thank you. So we now have so many social media that the really metacognitive skill, the skill how to learn, how to remember, is also about social media. So what we see in our country that we accept the social media more and more because they become part of the skill for young people. If we don't use them, we cannot work with them. So we have to learn them. And of course, we have the big infrastructure like in the cities. We have the smart cities with a lot of communication. Cars are monitored. There's a lot of sensors. And there's a dispute, of course, how far should the government know every behavior of the citizens? That is a really political issue. But anyway, it is about knowledge, it's about awareness, and it's about skills. So this is the main triangle I would like to bring to you, that we have the technology, we have the culture, they interact. Without technology, culture would go much slower. Without culture, we would not know what we can use morally. But the most interesting thing is the nature. How the nature relates to culture, and big question, how the nature is related to technology. Because now we have many new technologies like genetic modification, etc. Bioculture. Yes.
Sorry to stop you there, Prof. Can you make the slides in full slideshow?
Okay. In my system, it is in the full slideshow.
Is it? But for us, it's not.
Oh, it's a pity. Let me try.
Can you try again?
How is it still in a small size? Or yeah, let me
try to stop share and try again.
Is it better?
It's still the same.
Oh, sorry. Well, in that case, maybe I should make it larger. Let me see. Can you see it better now? Or?
Yes, it's better.
Okay. Sorry for that. There is, I think, a small technical problem. Let me go to the next slide. Yeah, so these are the most important topics. It's the mobile communication, it's smart environments, it's cyber physical systems, it's crowd sensing, data analytics, cloud computing. We have cyber security and biological social networks, and applied graph theory and game theory. Let me go to the next slide, I hope. Let's try. Okay. You can see here, the boy has the so-called Google Glass. Google Glass has been invented about 20 years ago, and there's a clear reason why Google did not pursue. Google was hesitant, and finally they decided we stop the Google Glass for the broader public. Why? Because the privacy issue. And that's important, I think. What we see in the classrooms, that as soon as students, they use the mobile phone for good reasons to search for some information, teachers are quite afraid that they will make a recording of the teacher. Of course, that's not the nice way. The nature of learning says we have politeness, we have our feeling of moral. The privacy issue is a big thing. So nowadays, there's a shift from the connectivity. It gets more connectivity rather than mobility. It's not only during the COVID virus. We see that because of ecology, the carbon footprint, we are hesitant now to travel all time by plane and by car. We have to be very careful on that. So the connectivity has become the major ideology, you could say. And quite important, what you see is a big keyboard where people work together. And the slogan is, the knowledge is not only in the person, it's also between the persons. Can you see the slides at this moment, Dr. Aliani? Can you see the slides?
We can, but it's a bit crop. Just make it a little smaller. If you cannot,
of course.
If you cannot make it full slides.
Is better?
Okay, yeah.
Or still more, so like this?
No, it's too much. Make it bigger, please.
Like this? No, still more?
More.
Yes.
Okay, as long as the title is there. Yeah, can you use that one?
How's it now? Is it big or still small?
It's still the same.
Ah, sorry.
It's
then
okay.
I will just read the text. So it's just help for your imagination.
I think it's okay. Yeah, we can continue.
So now the philosophy is that for education, quite important, that we don't want solo players. Our students, they need to be team players, good team players. How do you do that? Not to let them learn in isolation, but let them learn in teams. We call it collaborative or cooperative learning. And we should also take the consequence that we assess the knowledge in the group work. Students should be able to help their peers and to promote the learning among their peers. So that is the new theory, that the knowledge is so distributed that we need to help students to make it even better. This is a picture of our campus in University of Twente. It's a nice green campus, as you see. But important is that this is kind of augmented reality. This is a more schematic campus, and what you can see here, the navigation is more easy because there are clear names of the buildings, and you can even take the drone to fly over the campus, so you can have both representations, the landscape mode and the road. An important saying is by Dr. Kenneth Dunn. It says that if students don't learn the way we teach them, let's teach them the way they learn. It sounds very easy, but it is not. Because for teachers, it's mostly quite difficult to imagine what are the typical problems in the student. Still, teachers need to make the translation, think about what could be the real roadblock for the learner. That's a quite pedagogical question. There is a shift from long life learning. When I was a young guy in the school in the 50s, we were in the schools and we thought we have to learn for 10 or 20 years, and then we are ready with learning, and then we go for the job. But the opposite is now true. We know that as soon as you start a job, the learning becomes more and more important. That's why during the formal education, we need to prepare students for lifelong learning. It's an attitude. And I will go into details, but I will give you one example. What is the real essence of learning? In my definition, the learning is the willingness to change yourself, to adapt yourself so that you can accommodate for the future, in fact. Make yourself adaptable and communicative. So we go to the next bullet, active learning, playing, working. To go for that. So on the top, you see the active learning. I think everybody will accept that for good learning and for good teaching, students need to be activated, not only listen and hear, but they need to do something. How can you do that? The first thing is we go clockwise. We go from active to constructivistic learning. It means that students, when they learn concepts, some ideas, some formulas, they need to build the knowledge in their minds. And how do they do it? By combining with what they already knew before. That's called constructivistic learning, defined by Simon Peppert. Simon Peppert, the famous scholar who designed the logo system in MIT in the 80s of the last century. Then we go to the third one, it's cooperative learning, working together, learning together. Then we have authentic learning, means we have to be ourselves, otherwise we cannot really build upon our personality. And we have intentional learning, means that teachers, they need to make a reality in the classroom, not say, here we have to learn and here is the outside, is the real world. We have to prepare for the real world. No, inside the classroom is the real world. And there's also the theory by Dewey. Dewey is a very famous American philosopher in the 19th century. And he said, we should make school a real life. And that's the message. Let me go to the next slide. What you see here is that for a very long time, even in medieval time, children, when they have free time in the playing ground near the school, they will start playing. They invent the games and the plays. What's the difference between the playing and the gaming? Well, I think the real playing is when it's not for winning. Gaming is for winning. Playing is to understand something. So in playing, you have the freedom to use an object like a watch, and you can experiment to do something with it. You can even make it like an airplane or whatever. That's what young children do. When we get older, we are told you should stop the playing in the school. That's only for the kindergarten. I don't agree. I think the playing mindset, the willingness to ask questions, to experiment, to take risk, to get immersed, as if you are in a different world, is very helpful to understand complex concepts. And that's my message. So the playing is not only for the gaming, the playing is really for something comprehensive. Now, the interesting question is not so much the learning and the working, or the learning and the playing. Interesting is the playing and the working. Normally, when I would ask you, does it go together? You would say, no, my employer will be furious if I am playing during work. But what I say is that now we see a large number of people who are young and already have a burnout. Why? Because there's so much discipline, so much focusing that the mind gets in difficulty. And in order to escape from burnout, the playing mindset is a very necessary ingredient, I would say. We'll come to that back later when we talk about conceptual thinking. Now we go to the next bullet, the technical, communicative, and conceptual skills. I have to improvise a bit because my screen is not perfect, but maybe you can see on the right side, on the lower right side, we have technical skills. And that was the big issue for 200 years. Let's say the Industrial Revolution said workers need to be trained to do a very fixed routine job. And that's sometimes still the case. We still need a routine. If you cook, if you're cooking, you have to know all the routines. But in many jobs, we have the human skills. It's communication skills. It's the skill to understand, to be empathic, to allow another person to feel free in order to learn. So your neighbor or your colleague should learn too. And you are decisive. You can help your colleague to be a lifelong learner. So we call it human skills. What are conceptual skills? Conceptual skills is when you have to learn a complex concept. Like if we talk about democracy, a term like freedom or responsibility, or let's say delegation, those are complex concepts. They need to be elaborated. You cannot say, I learned the definition by heart and then I have the concept. No, those conceptual skills you have to develop. You have to feel familiar with those kind of things. If I ask entropy, that's an important concept in physics. You need the courage to think what could be entropy. And if I say a definition, entropy is the tendency to go to the optimal spread of noise, to go into chaos, then you have a clue, but it's not a complete concept. The concept can only be understood when you work with that idea. So let's see how we proceed. Because we had a long time, we had schools with the video and the radio and the TV. And then we had the language learning, second language learning. And then we have the group work. And now we have the mobile phone. So the mobile phone is the default device for learning. And so that we can say most of the people, they just learn by the mobile phone when they are traveling, when they are in the meeting, when they try to remember some data, they always have the smartphone. Still, there's a big contrast in the innovation in education versus the rest of the world. If you look to the medical practice, we see here operation room, we see there are it's not only one doctor, he's here, he or she, but there is the anesthesiast, there's a helper, and there is the nurse who really also, this is the novice. This person is learning by observing the experienced doctor, and the nurse is really handing over all the tools, helping the doctor. So there is a lot of revolution in the medical health system. Let's see how it works in education. After 500 years, we still have the same lecture hall. You can see here on the wall is a picture by Rembrandt. It's called the Anatomical Lesson. The famous doctor was explaining how you open the human body, dissection, and then you can learn about the anatomy and the physiology. But the main contract is there is a hall where many people can look to the front, to the screen, and hear the speaker. That's still the same paradigm. So we have not really changed essentially what is about learning and education. When I was young in the 60s, we had to learn this picture because it was famous that teachers are afraid of using the technology. Why? Because technology, like just my slide, they might stop working. And what should you do then? You should teach by heart, I would say. You have to teach by what you are, and you have to remember all the things. So the best training you can do is just go for a group of young people, start talking, entertaining them, feel free to talk, and you are already experienced teachers. But for young teachers, it's important that they get the confidence. They can talk about everything. It's not nonsense. No, it's because they know so much. Let's see how this works. This is a typical situation now. Students, they have all the tablets. So what can the teacher do? How should the teacher intervene? Here you see a situation where there's a teacher in the background, and he or she can go around and help the students who have special learning needs. But in general, teachers still are afraid. What's happening here? The teacher before the blackboard, what is she doing? She's explaining on the blackboard the situation of the computer. How does the computer needs to be operated, etc. It's a long story. But each of the students has already a computer, and they can learn with the computer. So the teacher is not really happy. What is more important is that the teacher can make a story, can tell a story. We call it narrative. Narrative is in fact, that's interesting, it's more than the story. Namely, the ideas, according to Plato, the pure ideas, they come from outside, far away in the universe. And they come through the window of the cave and they project on the wall. And the teacher is just modifying the concept so they can be understood. And that's the important role for a teacher. He or she is a mediator, and students are mostly very happy if the student goes into a story. Important guy in the history was Dr. Lev Vygotsky in the time of the Soviet Union in the 30s, 1930s. His idea was very clear. His idea was that learning is a social process. Teaching is a social process. Teaching is not only giving the information, and learning is not only receiving the information, it's the dialogue. The teacher should give his opinion, and the students should think about it and give back how they understand it. And then the teacher will be motivated to say, Okay, you understood well. So one aspect I would like to add, and there's a dialogue. There's an incremental process where the knowledge is growing between the people, just as I told. That's the idea by Vygotsky. And Vygotsky had more idea. In the top is the label technology, and here is identity and learning. So what we in fact have is that through the mobile phone, we become a little bit different person because we have new habits, we have new courage during the conversation to search for some information. It's not necessarily impolite if your opponent, if your neighbor sees that you really are dedicated to the topic of the conversation. So the identity is growing. And what is the pivot? The pivot is the community. The community is the neighborhood of people who want to offer each other. They have a kind of altruistic attitude. They want to service. They want to help the other person. As I think this is the essence of learning and teaching. It's not only giving and taking, it is careful, caring each other. That's the right attitude. And Vygotsky again was saying it. Another guy, quite important to understand my story, is Edgar Dale. The theory by Dale is that in the schooling process, in the instruction, for instance, we have on the bottom, we have the concrete experiences. And if you go higher, we have some compact representations like a simulation model. We have collaboration with the video conference. We have a hands-on workshop. We go a little bit more abstract. We have watching a demonstration, make an exhibition, watch videos, view images, hear, and speak and think. So the top of the pyramid is really the top of the abstract thinking. And what does it mean if we go into that? This is the lesson by William Glasser. He's not really an experimental scientist, but he says that there is an incremental process. When we read, we will only remember a small proportion, 10%. If we hear, we might remember more. Depends on the cognitive style. If we see something, nice pictures, schematic things is better for the memory. If we see and hear together, we get more, 50%. If we discuss with people, we have 70%. If we experience by ourselves. So if you give your first lesson or drive the car for the first time, you will never forget when you first drove the car. And then we have teaching someone else. That is the most essential thing. That's why for collaborative learning, it's not so much the issue that the weaker student can hear the message from the brighter student. That could help, but more important is that the weaker student is allowed to explain to the younger student a topic that he or she can understand. And by explaining, the weaker student gets more confidence, gets more metacognition, becomes a better learner. When he or she goes back to their own class, they can participate much better in a more active way. Well, this is the third model. It's based on Collop. Collop has said there is a cycle of experiences. It starts with the concrete experience. That's the pink segment. It's really what you feel, hear, taste, smell, etc. The next step is the reflective observation. After experience, Collop says you need some time to think about it, to reflect, to let's say, to make a theory on it. And then we have the third is an abstract conceptualization, could be schematic, for instance. And then we have active experimentation. That means from the knowledge, from the reflection, from the abstraction, we can make an experiment and we can say, if I want to make the paper fly, what could be the rules to make it fly? By throwing, give it a speed and it might fly for a while. So this is very active. It's active experimentation. And after that, we go back to the concrete experience. Fine. If you have questions, please put them in the text box and we will come to that later. It's another representation on the same same diagram. And we will now go through the times from old feudal time, when we were still in slavery, to the early urban time, early cities, villages, as a wall around the city. We had learning as social process. And then the industrial learning was, in fact, to copy the behavior and to perform the behavior as smooth as possible. Then we have nowadays, the learning is the spite of life. You could say, we will always learn. And learning is everywhere. And the final consequence, the postmodern idea is that living without learning. Why? Because learning is endemic in life. What you do, if it's your leisure time, if it's your family life, if it's if you drive the car, everywhere learning is in your mindset. You see information, you hear something. It's an ongoing process. We go now to holistic for deep learning. And this is, I hope you can see it. On the left side, you see the most common way of learning. Those are called the serialistic students. They have a fixed, they can cope with a fixed order. They can read, they can listen, they can remember in the chronology of the information, how it was given. That's comfortable. They are easy learners because they go smoothly, they follow the teacher. On the right side, where the pitches are coming in and out, it is a more complex way of learning. We call it holistic. And it means that students from this type, they always try to make connections. They try to understand what they knew before and what does it mean for what they have to learn today. And that's a time-consuming process. The question I was asking in previous years was, how come, why do some students have holistic style? Is it just because they are lazy, or are they stupid, or slowly? What is the reason? And we found out with a number of my colleagues that holistic students, they have a weaker, shorter memory. So they lose the information from a few seconds ago. And they need to make the connection to retrieve by saying, what was it about? It looked a bit similar to another theory. So they make so many connections that costs maybe 5 times more. So teachers, they typically say, holistic students, they are slow learners and they make it too complex. But in fact, they need to make it complex because the memory is so brittle, you see? And that's the problematic part. But the good part is that if we look 5 or 10 years later, the holistic students have remembered almost everything. Because of this elaboration, they made all the connections. And even more important, they are much better problem solvers because the knowledge is ready for retrieval. They make all the connections, so retrieval is quite possible. So we come back to this diagram, and now I hope to demonstrate why do we allow playing in the learning? Well, to help the holistic students to become even better problem solvers than they would be without playing. They need the time, they need to play with the information, etc. Similar, and that's our current study now, the working and the playing is a huge possibility. I think for your career, I expect that if you start studying the potential relation between playing and working, you become a rich person because employers, they need to understand why a certain amount of playing is important for the mindsets. It's important because otherwise they will lose their employee. That's my theory at this moment. Let's see an example. When I was in Japan, I very excited about Japan as a country, and I started to work in Sapporo on Hokkaido Island. And this was one of the Sunday afternoons when the students, they just finished their examinations, so they felt very free. and they start making their food and their music, and they ask, "Professor, please taste some of our delicious food." Of course I did. So these students, they need to play after the examinations. And now I went to another university, not so far from Sapporo. It's called Hakodate. And in Hakodate is the future university at that moment. And you can see here are not lecture halls. It is ateliers, workshops. Students are sitting here to work in teams, and they work for projects from the very early day. The teachers are not starting to explain. They just say, please look for an employer, a person who has a nice assessment, a nice job for you, and start doing it. If you get into problems, I can help you to find the information. But essentially, you have to learn through the work. And that's an important practice. And what I saw was amazing. The students, they go so fast. So they don't need a fancy fair like the students in Sapporo. They do it all the time. They are always free to relax, to have some music extra, to talk, to dance a little bit, to sleep sometimes. They eat in the same desk. So it's a much more natural situation. I'm now skipping some slides. This is the curriculum.
Sorry,
Yes.
Prof. Okay. Is it possible that we take one or two questions in
Yes,
the chat
absolutely.
box?
Go ahead. Could you tell me? Yes.
It's regarding the holistic learner. Professor Khatijah has asked a question here. What is the best learning media or platform for the holistic student? And also how to recognize a holistic learner?
Thank you. Very nice question. The last question is most easy. Typically, when students need more time to go through the book again, and normally you can see it, students who read page by page, only forward, they are serialistic students. If the student is searching, going back to another page, make some notes, make a diagram, ask some extra questions, we can be sure it's a holistic student. Why? Because the student has some memory, a weak memory, a very weak short-term memory. Long-term memory can be much better. Now, how can we support holistic? I think holistic students, they do exactly what they need to do. The question could be how to help the serialistic students, because they learn very easy, coming in easy, going out easy, but they will not remember. So what is the best method? My method is that problem-based learning is a good method to make serialistic students more deeper learning, more elaborative learning. You see? So holistic students, you give them a computer, you give them a tablet, you give them some material to experiment, and they will learn in a very productive way. They will do it because they have to. Serialistic students, they try to go on without understanding. They know it by memory, but they have no conceptual picture of the connections. Next question, please.
Question from Dr. Fadlina. How to best nourish holistic learners? We typically are expected to prepare some rubrics due to requirements of audit governance and etc. But we know some students are actually demonstrating extra competencies. Those special students also portray extraordinary behaviors, but sometimes are difficult to blend. How to best personalize teaching and learning for them?
You mean for the holistic students? Was this
yes, for the holistic. Yes, for the holistic learners. Yeah.
Let me give you an example what the problem-based learning means. When I was teaching for some weeks in Denmark, and that's the cradle where problem-based learning was invented, they give students a full year to orient what they would like to study. So it's an orientation year. And one of the things that happened in the news was that a mother had killed her children and killed herself later. And of course, society was paralyzed. It was a tragedy. No one could think in a rational way. And a group of these students who work in the first year to orient, they said, this is an important question. We need to do something. So they went in the neighborhood of the tragic family, spoke to the neighbors, spoke to the schools where the children were before, spoke to the doctor, spoke to the husband. And after a few weeks, they got some ingredients why the wife had killed herself and her children. And they wrote a book on it, a novel, and it became a bestseller. So these students had not yet followed courses in medical, in psychology, in sociology, but they had the courage to talk with the people and try to understand by describing it. That's a typical example of a holistic student. Holistic students will do it all the time, if you help them a little bit. Serialistic students will be angry. They say, sorry, I'm wasting my time. Tell me what I should learn. Please, teacher. And the teacher should say, I can help you, but finally you have to learn yourself how to conquer the unknown. And that's why for serious students, it's important that they are in an environment where they can really experiment, where they can work together, where they can do some problem solving. They need also more time. We have to break the speed of the serialistic students. I hope it's clearer.
Yes, Prof. Yes, yes. Shall we continue?
Yes, absolutely, please.
Okay.
I was just introducing curricula because that's the title, From Curricula to Successful Life. Typically, curricula are very dense descriptions of the content. What should we learn? Learn about, you can also say. And here you see a picture. The picture is correct in the sense that in Sofia, the capital of Bulgaria, all the buildings are there. Only what is a lie, what's not correct, is the constellation of the buildings. So the mutual positions, they are not correct. It's collage. They are pushed on top of each other in order to fit it in one picture. And that's what curricula do. And that's why I came to the next metaphor, the next comparison, that Bentheimer's Panopticon in the 19th century, 1850, Bentham said, it is like in life we want to see everything. And this was used for prisons, when one person in the middle could see all the rooms with the prisoners. And that's what we have now with the web. So it's not a solution. To see and to have access to all the information is not a solution. It is helpful, but not enough. And we see a long history of the hypermedia. This is a book mill with 16 books. You could turn the wheel very easy and compare the books. And then we have electronic screens, also very good for flexibility. But it's not a solution for learning. What do we need in learning? In learning, I think it's important to have a critical mindset. If we learn like a scholar, we have to be curious to read behind the text. So that's what we are doing now in the schools. Say to students, not only learn or read the text line by line, but try to reason, why was it written? What's the comparison with another text? So to make more, I would say, holistic elaborations. That was what we are doing now. And this is the older picture where, of course, the contemplation was the favorite modality. Teachers generally are afraid that students will escape to the internet and never come back or have bad information. And that's true, but avoiding it will keep the students more curious and will not teach them. They will not learn how to handle the large amount of information. This is a cartoon based on logo. If you give very much freedom, of course, students will get trapped in a kind of maze, you could say. What do we have? We have 4 types of schematic representations. We have conceptual, we have epistemic, episodic, and procedural. Conceptual is when you make a concept map. So you draw the main nodes to understand entropy, for instance, or a concept like inflation. It has to do with prices, with the market mechanism. That could be a conceptual representation. Epistemic is that you go and find some more generic terms, like the law of demand could be more general than a conceptual. So epistemic is a kind of overlay. It's a more higher level of description. Episodic is the happenings, the situations that happened where you learned from. And then we have the procedural. If you say, I want to do a certain job, you start with the procedural, even without understanding. So what is my story here? We need schematic representations to mitigate between the jobs and the learning of the student. Before you learn a skill, you need to understand what the skill is about. This is one of the early schematic representations called the Sephirot from the 14th century. It is a scheme meant to study, to contemplate before you start reading. So if you would like to read the Quran or the Bible or the Talmud, it was encouraged first to think what is in your mind at that moment. Then make your mind clear, and then you are open for the new information. So we call this a metacognitive step. It's a prior step to the real, to the learning by receiving. This is a diagram. You can make some computation by a formula. Which of the nodes is in the central position where you can already see the character C has the highest centrality. It's +2, and the least central is A, E, and F. Here they have only one connection, and not. So you can see it's a recursive mechanism because you count not only from E to C, but also C to A and C to D. I will give you later a copy of this slide. From now, I give you one conceptual representation. I think we still have the time. Let me check. Yeah, maybe a little bit of time. This is conceptual thinking in the cinema, in the car industry. And finally, you can talk about this picture. What is your interpretation? What is on this picture? And many of you will say it's about urban planning. How can you build a city by planting it? How can you make buildings grow? And that's correct. Those are critical questions, but this is a critical picture. It says that many of the cities, they have been developed as if it's a farm. As trees, they grow, but it's not a good society. Not necessarily. Maybe it becomes a good society, but it's not an agriculture sphere. Also, this picture was once in the newspapers in Holland. It means that there was a long time discussion when the new rapid train was coming, the TGV or the Shinkansen in Japan. Such train needs a second rail system because it goes so fast. But the politics was not clear. They said, we don't like a second rail. We have a very small country. It's the green heart of Holland. We cannot allow ourselves to make a second rail. And of course, it was not possible technically. And then one of the journalists was drawing this cartoon. What does it show? It shows that what we want is not possible. You cannot make the train speed up on the same rail. It's dangerous. It will never work. So based on this picture, the same day in the Dutch parliament, the decision was made, we need a second railway track. And that happened. Now we have a perfect system for that use. When we have a picture like this, it's a kind of commercial, you see. And what is the cynical message? The cynical message is, of course, if you love someone, you cannot give your heart. You can only say, I like you, I love you, but really giving the heart will make the people feel terrible because you don't want to get the heart. So this is also what we call visual literacy. Try to understand what is the meaning. I give you another, for instance, this one. This picture, each of you can think about the meaning behind the picture. And if you look to the details, you see here the small child with a bear behind him. The boy is not happy. You can see it. He's really sad. And the man is a very formal person, maybe representing the government or the court of justice or something. And of course, students, they can learn by observing, by thinking. And that's different than reading the text with the explanation. So this is one part of conceptual thinking, to think from the side of the deep meaning. Doctors, they also do it. When they make an intervention, you can see many doctors working together in teams. This is one of my groups where students are observing the medical doctors, and they have, we call mannequin. It's where you do the virtual operation, and you can see on the screen how it works. If you remove the gallbladder, for instance, you have to do the virtual operation before you go to the real patient. This is a haptic device. It's also important, the experience of pushing a pen. If you have a pen, the pen now is connected to a device. If you push the pen, you can feel the resistance, as if you push the human body, the human heart or the lungs or the liver. And this is used to demonstrate how doctors need to become sensitive for haptic experiences. It's not the same as tactile. Tactile is if you feel some small pattern on the surface. That's the tactile. But this is really feel the movement and the resistance when you push a little bit harder. This doctor is Dr. Bob. Bob is one of my colleagues. He's calibrating the same machine for haptic experience. And he says when you push the human stomach in a certain place, in a certain patient with some medical problem, the resistance, the pushing effect is so and so, and he's calibrating the machine. What we found out is that students are very keen to learn these motoric skills. And in 1 or 2 hours, they have the same capacity, the same skill performance as the doctor has. So that's a very fruitful example before they go to the real patient. We did some research with the stent for aneurysm. When the aorta is going to dilute, the doctors need to make some intervention. They need to make some stents, so keep the size of the aorta in a certain proportion. And it's a very difficult thing. They shift from the leg a kind of tube in the aorta, in the middle of the body, and it needs some sealing before the kidneys go here, before the bifurcation for the legs go. See, those are the red parts that are problematic. So this kind of exercise to make it really. What we found out is there were 2 conditions. Stereoptic, where we have really shutter glasses, means we can see from one object from 2 sides. In a short distance, we can see the blood vessel more carefully, versus the biocular. Biocular means the 2 eyes have the same information. So you can't see depths, much more complex. But stereoptic devices were very heavy. And we found out that the doctors who have a good spatial imagination, like the doctors here, high visual spatial, they have almost similar capacity. They don't need the benefit of biocular. So they are better off. They have a very light, easy device. And the other one, they need really to benefit from a stereoptic device. Well, let me go to the conclusion. In general, designing education is not a linear process. Typically, we might say, this is the kind of process we analyze, design, develop, and implement. We call it ADI, and we have evaluation between, but that's a linear process. And many times it does not work. Many times it's a more complex thing with associations, rebuilding, and we need a theory for the design. Excuse me, the parody, the contradiction is that for the production, we have many tools. That's the vertical line here on the top. Many tools for AutoCAD and all these devices. But the impact is low at this stage. The impact of the conceptual design is very high, but there are only very few tools. So this is a trade-off. We need to make more tools for conceptual design. Sorry for that. This is my final slide for the discussion. The learning, the playing, and the working. We need a more active learning paradigm. We need the playing as a mindset, the critical thinking, and that's our job for the next coming years. Thank you for listening. I'm very happy to be your guest. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Commerce. I love this slide, looking at playing and working. So we can be seriously playful or playfully serious. Okay, I would like to invite any participants who would like to ask questions. Can you introduce yourself and then just voice out your question, if any?
Hello, can I take the first question opportunity, please?
Sure, it's Dr. Fadlina, isn't it?
Yes, hi, Prof. Commerce. Thank you very much for being around and sharing this wonderful slides, wonderful presentation.
It's my pleasure.
Yes, I can't get enough of asking the first question just now. If possible, can I take the opportunity to ask another?
Sorry, which slide would you like to see?
Nothing specific, but just now I asked one question, but I have an extension to that question. You mentioned about the PBL, but based on the theory of balancing various characteristics of learners, well, it's a dream of an educator to be able to personalize our learning to the students. But how to best balance the way that we can benefit the students from what we are trying to deliver or share or inculcate during the learning. How to balance best between the holistic and the serialist or many other kind of students. Would the answer be something like flexible assessment, or personalized assessment, besides just merely personalized delivery? What's your view?
Thank you so much. I would like to give my answer in very few slides. My main answer is, if you look to the London Underground map, this is a long evolution from the physical map. Like here we had a very early beginning. This is the real map of London. And then there was an engineer who said, we don't need a map to find the right metro connection. The underground means to find the right line so that we don't need to change. In other words, what I would like to recommend for problem-based learning is let students make a map of the knowledge they have to understand. And many notes will be question marks. And then it's a good communication device for the teacher to go to these students and say, okay, you have some doubt about these connections. Let me teach about it. Let me try to explain. So you see, we need some navigational device. We need the right representations to open the dialogue between the teacher and the student. That's my answer.
Very interesting. So this would be something like inquiry-based learning, self-regulated. Yeah, I understand. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Nofalina. Any more questions? Any more? Or perhaps I can ask one question, Prof. Commerce. You mentioned about playing versus gaming just now.
Correct.
And playing is not about winning. It's about understanding and being, immersed into learning topics or take risks. You mentioned about you mentioned just now. It's just that we have a term called gamification as one of the methodology for teaching or strategies. Perhaps you would enlighten us a bit on gamification, because the concept has been used quite widely now when you say it's not winning, but games is for winning, so perhaps game-based learning or gamification can be adopted?
Yes. Well, thanks for your question. In fact, gamification is not bad. It's a kind of activator, just to do some very quick exercise, and students, they like it. But in fact, it's not a real stage of understanding. For understanding, the mindset is better off when we give some space, what I call reflection space. So it needs more time. And you could make a game of it, but I would call it playing, because playing means that your agenda is shifting. So a very important phenomena is the so-called double loop learning. Maybe you know the theory by RGL. The theory is that in playing or in gaming, you become a better player. But finally, you need a bigger loop to learn about the way you were learning, the way you were playing. And then you change the game. You say, I design a new game, which is more fair, or is more interesting, or more competitive. So that means double loop learning means that you do the game, you put it aside, and then say, we want to make a better game. And that's the meta learning. And that's closer to playing, because then you are playing the new game, and you find out that maybe it's not a good game. You need more rules, and it becomes more complex. So this is the learn to learn effect. And that's what I would call meta learning, by critical thinking and a playful mindset. Curiosity is an important one. Risk taking, and flexibility, cognitive flexibility. So to be willing to look to the same problem from a different side. Lateral thinking, what is called by De Bono, when he's talking about thinking, as maybe you know the theory. Lateral thinking means you have a problem, you go to the solution, but you got stuck. And then you have to look from the other side and see where is the problem in your problem approach. And then you might be a really creative problem solver, and to bypass the real problem, or to solve it. Yeah. There is a famous, if I may ask you, may I tell you very short. It is an anecdote, but it's also a demonstration of problem solving. There was a person who was living by himself in a house, nice, quiet street, but every evening there were some youngsters in the street talking very loudly before his house. And he was really annoyed. And then he thought, I need to find a trick to get rid of them. And what did he do? He went out, he went to the young people, said, would you like to help me? Because I'm making a recording for a radio play. Could you be talking very loud? I will record it, and I will give you $5. Of course, they wanted to earn the dollar, so they did it. And then the next day, they were again, and he went to the students or to the young people. I said, would you like to help me again? Please talk very loudly. But today I don't have dollars, so you should do it for free. And then they said, no, we are not going to do that. So they left, and the man could live in a quiet place, you see. And that's kind of problem solving that we would like to see, to make cities more safe, schools more, let's say, friendly, peaceful, and harmony. So these are values that I think we need to achieve. And I think the playful mindset. So the teacher is the first person who needs to think, how can I be a creative problem solver? Just by trying, I would say. It's not really an abstract skill, just trying and see where is the solution, and you will certainly find it. If you start searching, you will find it. And then students will see that our teacher is a very good creative person. He has some doubts too. He has not all the knowledge, but we trust he can lead us to the next state of the knowledge. And that is, I think, what we need to find.
Okay, thank you, Prof. That's a very enlightening information talking about double loop learning. I'm opening up for other participants, if any, if you want to ask question. Do we have questions from participants? No? Okay, so so thank you. I would like to say a lot of thanks to Professor Commerce for being with us today, and to all participants. Perhaps this is what we need to apply to our curriculum design, taking into consideration various style of learning. We have heard about serialist and also holistic type of students, and perhaps this should be our concerns when we developed a curriculum at our university. And with that, I would like to thank also the organizer, Center for Academic Development, for having this session. And to Professor Commerce, please do not hesitate to be with us again, maybe in the future.
Absolutely.
And sure.
Absolutely.
All right. So with that, I would like to thank.
Excuse me, can I suggest to have a photo session with everybody? If
Oh,
you don't
yes.
mind, yeah, let's do it.
Okay. So where should?
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh dan salam sejahtera. Warga pendidik merupakan tunggak utama yang memikul tanggungjawab dan amanah dalam melahirkan graduan yang holistik dan berdaya saing di zaman penuh mencabar ini. Bagi mengenang jasa dan mengiktiraf sumbangan warga pendidik, tanggal 5 Oktober telah diumumkan sebagai Hari Akademia di peringkat nasional. Bersempena Hari Akademia, Universiti Putra Malaysia menganjurkan program Bulan Pendidik pada bulan Oktober. Saya dengan rasa berbesar hati ingin mengucapkan selamat menyambut Hari Akademia dan Bulan Pendidik tahun 2020 kepada seluruh warga pendidik Universiti Putra Malaysia. Sekian, terima kasih. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Saya ingin mengucapkan selamat Hari Akademia kepada seluruh warga pendidik di Universiti Putra Malaysia. Kita teruskan usaha kita selama ni untuk mendidik anak bangsa kita menjadi orang yang berguna di masa akan datang.
Selamat menyambut Hari Akademia.
Selamat menyambut Hari Akademia.
Selamat menyambut Hari Akademia.
Saya mengucapkan selamat Hari Akademia kepada semua pegawai akademik Universiti Putra Malaysia.
I would like to wish Happy Academia Day to all academic staff of Universiti Putra Malaysia.
Aku dekat meri selamat Hari Pengajar ngagai semua bala pengajar Universiti Putra Malaysia.
Universiti Putra Malaysia verikum very good tandirikum aning pestaw sabergelikum. Selamat
Aku
Hari
juga selamat onu Akademia nudu seorang pibaas Universiti Putra Malaysia.
Selamat Hari Akademia.